Hey friends, tonight, we're pulling back the velvet curtain on a world where beauty and filth lived side by side. A palace so dazzling it blinded visitors, and so corrupt it stank to high heaven. This isn't just a story about golden halls and royal banquets. It's about secrets, power, survival, and the price of luxury when the perfume fades. Welcome to Versailles, the most glamorous, dangerous, and downright bizarre court in all of history. Before we dive in, tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing just how far these stories travel, and who's tuning in from the most unexpected corners of the world. And if you enjoy these deep dives into the hidden, dramatic side of history, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Here, the only rule is to enjoy the journey, and maybe, just maybe, look at the past with new eyes. Maybe dim the lights, maybe throw a shawl over your shoulders, or open a window to let in a little night air. Because tonight's story doesn't begin in a fairy tale. It begins in a palace, shining like a mirage on the horizon. A place where gold leaf, gossip, and secrets fight for space under the chandeliers. Versailles. The heart of civilization, the playground of kings, and, if we're honest, the most gloriously disgusting palace in all of Europe. Your journey starts before dawn, rolling along a rutted road that might as well be the spine of France. By the time the carriage rattles to a stop, your bones are already sore. You step out, half expecting the world to be changed just by being here. The sun is rising, splintering over the gilded gates. Carriages are everywhere. Some magnificent, some battered, horses steaming in the morning chill, their riders trying not to look like they've been up all night gambling or, worse, eavesdropping. There's a sound, a sort of background hum, laughter, hooves, and the high-pitched warble of a violin somewhere far off. First, it dazzles you. Versailles is impossible to take in at a glance. Gold everywhere, on the gates, the statues, the very tips of the roofline. Marble columns, fountains taller than trees, peacocks strutting in the garden as if they own the place. And honestly, in some ways, they do. The air is thick with the scent of roses, wet grass, and wait, is that? You catch it, just for a moment. Something underneath the perfume. Something sour and earthy and ancient. You try to shake it off. It must be the horses. A young footman appears at your elbow, so silent he might have grown from the gravel. "Welcome to Versailles," he says, and his bow is so low you fear for his spine. The livery is immaculate powder blue with gold piping, and you wonder how long it takes to get that much starch into one garment. He gestures for you to follow, and you do because that's what one does here. You follow, you wait, you keep your head down and your eyes up, and you pretend you belong. Crossing the forecourt is like stepping onto a stage. Every glance feels rehearsed. The nobles sweep past, their shoes clicking on the stones, their laughter a little too sharp, a little too desperate. Men with wigs so tall they graze the doorway. Women with skirts so wide they have to turn sideways to fit through. Someone jostles you. A marquis, perhaps, or a mere upstart with ambitions. Muttering a half apology that smells of wine and rosewater. Inside, the world changes. You're swallowed by velvet, by candlelight, by the endless glitter of mirrors reflecting faces, jewels, secrets. The ceiling soars overhead, painted with gods and angels. Gilded doors open and close with the hush of 1,000 whispered intrigues. The crowd pulses around you. Silk rustling, fans snapping open and shut. The low thunder of shoes on marble. For a moment, you lose your bearings. Versailles is a maze, a honeycomb, a living organism that breathes courtly ambition and exhales exhaustion. You try to focus. Your invitation is in your hand, now slightly damp with nerves. A liveried servant checks it, barely glancing up, then waves you forward into the waking heart of the palace. Every step brings a new assault on your senses. Incense and sweat, perfume and pipe smoke. The cold drift of air through a corridor that hasn't been aired out in years. Here and there, clusters of courtiers pause their conversations just long enough to scan your clothes, your face, your shoes, judging, weighing, filing you away for future gossip. At the end of a hallway, you're stopped by another servant, this one older, with a mustache so grand it could house a family of sparrows. He nods you through a narrow door, and suddenly you're in a smaller chamber. Paneled in wood, thick carpets underfoot, golden light from a dozen candles. You realize with a jolt that this is only a waiting room. Versailles is full of them. Spaces where time is wasted, where hope dies, where ambitions are sharpened or blunted. You're not alone. Across the room, a young woman is fanning herself with emotion so violent it's almost aggressive. Her gown is the color of crushed cherries, her hair piled in perfect, mathematical waves. She catches your eye and lifts one eyebrow in silent greeting, a gesture that is both invitation and warning. "First time?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. There is a gleam in her eyes that tells you she has seen it all. You nod, feeling suddenly transparent. "Don't worry," she says, leaning closer. "The smell fades after a few weeks, or maybe you just stop noticing." She smiles, and you realize she's not joking. A bell rings somewhere, high, insistent, the kind of sound that means someone important wants something right now. The entire room stiffens. Within seconds, the double doors at the far end swing open, and a footman calls a name. Not yours, not yet. The woman in red stands, sweeps past you in a cloud of perfume and cool amusement. You catch a whiff as she goes. Lavender, powder, and something darker. Metallic, almost a reminder that beneath the lace and brocade there is still skin, sweat, fear. You're left alone with your thoughts, and the smell, and the rising certainty that Versailles is nothing like you imagined. It is brighter, grander, filthier. When your name is finally called, your heart is hammering. You smooth your wig, check your cuffs, and step forward into a world where nothing is quite what it seems. The corridors are impossibly long, lined with portraits of men and women who stare down at you with painted suspicion. Every third alcove holds a vase, a statue, or a marble bust, some chipped, some flawless. Here and there you notice a stain on the carpet, a scuff on the paneling, the faintest trace of something unpleasant on the air. You're not sure if you're imagining it, or if everyone else has simply agreed never to mention it. You pass a group of pages, barely more than children, carrying trays of fruit and sweet pastries. They giggle as you walk by, not unkindly, but with the careless energy of youth. One drops a grape. Another kicks it under a table with a practiced flick of the shoe. You remember, suddenly, that Versailles is always hungry. For food, for gossip, for anything new. At last, you reach a grand staircase, the banister carved and gilded, the steps polished by thousands of footsteps. Servants bustle past, arms full of linens and buckets. One glances up, catches your eye, and quickly looks away. There is a kind of silent panic in his movements, a sense that no matter how fast he goes, he is always a step behind. You follow the crowd up the stairs, into the heart of the palace. The noise increases. Music, laughter, the drone of voices all overlapping, all trying to be heard. And underneath it, always that scent. Roses and something else, something persistent. You're ushered into a grand salon. Walls dripping with gold and mirrors, chandeliers blazing overhead. The crowd here is thicker, more elegant, more dangerous. Everywhere, eyes watching, calculating, hungry. A servant appears at your elbow with a tray of wine. You accept a glass more out of habit than desire. The wine is sharp, dry, and surprisingly good. You take a sip and immediately regret it. The taste lingers, oddly metallic, as if the glass itself is tarnished. Beside you, an older gentleman clears his throat. He is dressed impeccably, his wig powdered to perfection. But there is a stain on his cuff and a slight odor that even the best cologne cannot mask. "New to court?" he asks, his accent thick with Parisian pride. You nod. "Is it always so lively?" He chuckles, a low, knowing sound. Versailles is a stage, but the real play happens behind the curtains. Watch your step and your tongue. The walls have ears and noses. Before you can reply, a commotion at the far end of the room draws your attention. A woman has fainted, her friends fluttering around her like startled doves. A physician is summoned, brisk and impatient. "Too much powder," someone whispers, "or not enough breakfast." You watch as she is helped to her feet, her face as white as the wig she wears. The old man leans in. It's the heat, the crowds, the stress. But mostly, he lowers his voice. It's the smell. You get used to it, or you go mad. The crowd begins to move, drawn toward a pair of double doors that lead to the Hall of Mirrors. You follow, swept along by the tide. The hall is breathtaking. Mile after mile of glass and gold, sunlight pouring through windows tall enough to swallow you whole. And yet, here too, the air is thick, heavy, faintly sour. As you walk, you begin to notice the small things. A cracked tile, a wilted bouquet, the shadow of a stain beneath a priceless carpet. The more you look, the more you see. Versailles is not perfect. It is beautiful, but it is crumbling, alive, wounded by the weight of its own excess. You pause beside a window, looking out over the gardens. They are immaculate, geometric, endless. But even from here, you can see the mud at the edges, the gardeners struggling to keep up with the relentless growth, the crows picking at scraps left behind after last night's feast. A child runs past, laughing, chased by a nursemaid. The child is spotless. The nursemaid's apron is splattered with mud. You realize with a start that everyone here is fighting a losing battle against dirt, against time, against the inevitability of decay. Suddenly, a bell rings, louder this time, urgent. Servants hurry to their stations. Nobles drift toward the antechamber. It is time for the royal procession, the daily spectacle that keeps Versailles spinning on its axis. You take a deep breath, straighten your back, and prepare to face the king. Whatever you expected, you realize now, Versailles is bigger, brighter, dirtier, and more dangerous than any place you have ever known. And this is only the beginning. A hush falls over the crowd as the doors to the royal apartments begin to swing open. The murmurs shift, a ripple of anticipation and envy moving like static through the room. You've heard of this moment. The lever du roi, the ritual of the king's rising, a spectacle that is half ceremony, half theater, and all power. You feel yourself drawn forward, part of the herd, part of the show. You can sense eyes on you, the courtiers who have done this 1,000 times, the newcomers desperate to see, to be seen, to catch a glimpse of Louis himself, to maybe, just maybe, be remembered. The press of bodies is real, the air close and heavy with expectation, and with the thick, inescapable aroma that defines Versailles more than any crown or portrait ever could. You catch fragments of conversation as you move. Did you hear about Madame de Chartres? A scandal. Her chamber pot tipped over in the gallery, right in front of the bishop. The king's dog bit the Comte de Noailles again. He'll never live it down. It's all gossip, all performance. But underneath the laughter, there's an edge of panic. Reputation here is a fragile thing, always a heartbeat away from disaster. At last, you find yourself swept into a smaller chamber, one gilded and cluttered with painted screens, chairs, a table crowded with empty glasses and sticky wine stains. The courtiers cluster, fanning themselves. A woman in emerald silk glances at you and wrinkles her nose, as if she's caught a bad smell. You check yourself, have you stepped in something? But then you realize, she's not smelling you. She's smelling Versailles. Everyone is. A servant bustles past, carrying a porcelain bowl filled with rose water and towels. Another follows, bearing a tray of sweetmeats that have already begun to sweat in the heat. You wonder how much of the palace's perfume is just a desperate attempt to mask the unmaskable. Here and there you catch sight of orange peels, little cloth sachets tucked into sleeves, flowers pinned behind ears, everyone fighting their private war against the stink. A thin, elderly man in a threadbare velvet coat steps up beside you, breathing heavily. "First time?" he asks, not unkindly. You nod. He grins, revealing teeth like crumbling gravestones. "They never tell you about the smell, do they?" He laughs. "Don't worry, you'll adjust, or you'll lose your sense of smell altogether. Some say that's a blessing." You try to laugh, but it catches in your throat. In the corner, you see a maid frantically dabbing at a spill on the carpet. It's not working. The stain only spreads, turning darker and more ominous. No one says a word. No one ever does. The tension rises as a herald appears, tapping a silver-tipped cane against the floor for silence. His Majesty is awake. Prepare yourselves. The mood shifts instantly. Spines straighten, fans flutter, voices drop to whispers. You follow the crowd through another set of doors, this one guarded by a pair of soldiers in dazzling blue. They barely glance at you. You are part of the background now, another extra in the endless play of Versailles. You enter the royal bedchamber, vast and dazzling, the centerpiece of the palace. The king's bed is enormous, draped in gold and crimson, the sheets perfectly arranged. Louis XIV himself sits upright, already dressed, his wig an architectural marvel, his face a careful mask of boredom and calculation. Around him, a dozen men jostle for space, each more eager than the last to be seen helping the king rise, wash, dress, or merely breathe. The ceremony unfolds with practiced precision, each step prescribed by tradition, every gesture watched by 100 hungry eyes. The king is offered a glass of water, a towel, a comb. His breakfast is served on porcelain, the steam rising in delicate tendrils. And yet, even here, the reality seeps in. A faint, acrid note lingers in the air, a reminder that no matter how high you rise, you are still, in the end, just another body in a world built on rot and sweat. Someone coughs. A nobleman with a face the color of milk, his eyes darting, desperate for approval. The king ignores him, focusing instead on a document thrust forward by a nervous secretary. In the corner, a page stifles a sneeze, earning a glare from the chief valet. You watch, fascinated and repulsed, as the ceremony spirals toward its conclusion. At last, the king rises. The crowd parts, a path opening through bodies like water parting for a ship. He glides forward, radiating a gravity that draws everyone in. You bow, as low as you dare, and hope that your knees don't betray you. When you rise, he has already moved on, the crowd swirling in his wake, leaving only the echo of his presence and the faintest, unmistakable scent of humanity. The procession moves down the hall, toward the chapel for morning prayers. You follow, swept along by the tide, your mind racing with impressions, images, questions. The palace feels both infinite and suffocating, a labyrinth of beauty and decay, power and desperation. You catch sight of your reflection in a mirror. Wigs slightly askew, eyes wide, a bead of sweat trickling down your temple. You laugh, quietly, and adjust your wig. There is no escape from the performance here. You must play your part or be forgotten. As you pass through the hall of mirrors, the sunlight crashes in, dazzling, relentless. For a moment, you are blinded, disoriented, overwhelmed. The faces around you shimmer and blur, gold and glass and flesh all mingling into one impossible vision. And then, just as quickly, it's over. The spell breaks, the crowd disperses, each person rushing to their own secret appointment, their own whispered intrigue, their own struggle to stay afloat in the quicksand of court life. You find yourself alone at last, standing in a small side corridor, the sounds of the court fading behind you. For the first time, you allow yourself to breathe deeply, to take in the reality of Versailles, the beauty, the filth, the madness. And somewhere, down a darkened hallway, you hear laughter, wild, desperate, triumphant. In that moment that you have truly arrived. And this is only the beginning. You try to steady yourself, blending in with the endless current of footmen, nobles, servants, and shadows as they swirl through Versailles' winding arteries. You pass through chambers large and small, some glittering with candlelight and crowded with bodies, others silent and cold as tombs. Every now and then, you glimpse a window, a shaft of morning sun, a flash of green from the gardens, a reminder that outside, the world is still real. But inside, everything is performance. At every turn, you're met by the grand ballet of court life. Pages glide past, clutching trays with trembling hands, eyes darting for a sign of approval or worse, imminent disaster. Maids hurry by with bundles of linens, their faces pale, their movements efficient. Everywhere, the sound of footsteps, soft on carpets, sharp on marble, constant and restless. You're shepherded into a breakfast room, the tables groaning under platters of bread, fruit and cheese, at least for those who can claim a place near the king's orbit. The farther you sit from power, the staler the bread, the more questionable the butter. You find a seat beside a window, close enough to the center of action to see the spectacle, but distant enough that your plate holds more hope than promise. The air in the room is thick, perfume, sweat, candle wax, the tart sting of vinegar from a spilled cruet. You hear laughter, brittle, breaking on the hard edge of hunger and rivalry. A gentleman to your left, gaunt but elegant, tears at a heel of bread so hard it nearly snaps in half. He does it with the nonchalance of a man who spent years gnawing at both crusts and ambition. Opposite you, a young woman with powdered hair and wary eyes lifts her cup, inspects it, and sets it down with a sigh. She glances your way, offering a smile so quick it might have been a wince. You learn not to trust anything here, she says sotto voce. Not the food, not the wine, certainly not the smiles. You nod, uncertain if this is invitation or warning. She lowers her gaze, tracing circles on the tablecloth with a chipped fingernail. It's all about appearances. Underneath, well, it's best not to look too closely. Your hunger wins over your hesitation. The bread is dry, the cheese sharp, the fruit bruised and sticky. The coffee, if you can call it that, tastes of burnt chicory and disappointment. Still, you eat. Quickly, quietly, not daring to show want or distaste. You mimic the others, watching as they dab their lips with monogrammed cloths. Their every gesture an act in the endless theater of Versailles. The conversation around you shifts and eddies, like a river that never finds the sea. Stories surface and sink. Who fainted during prayers, whose debts have multiplied, which ambassador made a fool of himself before the king. Scandal is a currency more valuable than gold, and everyone here is both merchant and merchandise. A sudden shriek, high, startled, cuts through the babble. All eyes turn to the far corner, where a small dog, its fur powdered to match its mistress, has leapt onto the table, scattering raisins and biscuits in its wake. Its owner, a formidable lady swaddled in layers of lace, merely laughs, a sound that ripples out, equal parts joy and warning. No one dares complain. You realize in that moment that Versailles belongs to those who command attention, no matter how absurd the method. The servants move in quickly, sweeping away the debris, their faces impassive. You notice with growing discomfort how tired they look. Their uniforms are crisp, but their eyes are shadowed, their hands chapped and raw. You recall whispers you heard on arrival, that the palace eats its own, servant and noble alike, burning through lives as carelessly as candles. As breakfast ends, a bell rings again. The sound is everywhere, sharp as a knife, slicing through the layers of conversation and pretense. People rise, some with practiced grace, others with barely concealed reluctance. The procession toward the next ritual begins. Mass in the chapel, another opportunity to be seen, to pray for favor, or at least for survival. You trail the crowd through corridors grown crowded with expectation. The palace is brighter now, sunlight slanting through vast windows, pooling on parquet floors. Dust motes swirl in the air, catching the light and lending every room a haze of unreality. You pass a line of women, their skirts rustling like dry leaves, whispering secrets behind painted fans. Men adjust their wigs, their swords, their pride. A sour-faced nobleman brushes past, trailing a cloud of cologne so heavy you nearly gag. He spares you a glance, eyes narrowed in calculation. You look away first. You pause outside a half-open door, curiosity winning over caution. Inside, a servant is changing linens, stripping a bed so large it could sleep a family. The sheets are stained, the mattress pocked and sagging. The air is thick with lye and stale perfume. The servant, a boy not much older than yourself, works quickly, pausing only to cough into his sleeve. You slip away before he notices you, but the image lingers. You wonder how many secrets, how much exhaustion, are hidden beneath the silk and velvet of Versailles. The chapel is cool and dim, the air heavy with incense and hope. You find a place at the back, pressed between a marble pillar and a dowager countess who mutters prayers with the urgency of someone bargaining for her soul. The king enters to a flurry of bows and curtsies. The congregation rises and falls as one, a sea of bodies swaying to the rhythm of ceremony. The priest drones on Latin phrases lost in the echo. You watch the faces around you, some rapt, some bored, some quietly calculating the next move in the game. A page dozes, head nodding, until a sharp nudge from his neighbor wakes him. When the service ends, the crowd dissolves once more into 1,000 private dramas. Some linger to gossip, others hurry away. You're caught in the flow, swept out into a side garden where the air is fresher, the light sharper, the sense of relief almost physical. Here, the palace's facade falters for a moment. The paths are muddy, the flower beds trampled by too many feet. Servants haul buckets of water. Gardeners chase geese from the hedges. Children shriek and dart between statues. The scent is stronger here, earthy, alive, unmistakably human. A breeze catches your hair, carrying with it the sounds of Versailles. Laughter, argument, the distant crash of a dropped tray. You watch as a pair of young women lean in close, their heads bowed, their hands quick and secretive. You catch a word here, a gesture there, enough to know that even in paradise, conspiracy flourishes. You turn, half expecting to see the king himself, but instead you find only the endless sprawl of palace and garden, shimmering in the morning light. For a moment, you are utterly alone, lost in the splendor and squalor, the beauty and rot of the most magnificent prison ever built. You walk on, careful not to slip in the mud. The hem of your coat is already damp and dirty. No one comments, no one cares. Here, even perfection is stained at the edges. Back inside, the halls are emptier. The crowds have scattered to private chambers, to whispered meetings, to assignations behind locked doors. You wander, unsure of your destination, but unwilling to leave just yet. You pass a door left ajar and glance inside. A small group of servants huddle around a bucket, their voices low and urgent. One pours water from a battered pitcher, another scrubs at a stain on the floor. The smell is sharp, chemical, but underneath it you catch the unmistakable scent of despair. Further along, you hear laughter, soft, mocking, tinged with cruelty. Two nobles, both barely older than you, stand by a window, their gazes fixed on the garden below. "He'll never recover," one whispers, lips curled in a smile. "Not after last night." The other laughs. "He should have known better." Versailles forgives nothing. You move on, shaken, uncertain. You realize that the palace is not just a place. It is a living thing, devouring hope and innocence as easily as bread and wine. You find yourself at last in a quiet corridor, lined with portraits of women. Queens, duchesses, lovers, all gazing down with the same measured disinterest. At the end of the hall, a single window opens onto a hidden courtyard, choked with weeds, the stonework crumbling, the air thick with the scent of wild roses and something darker beneath. You lean against the windowsill, breathing deeply, letting the reality of Versailles settle in your bones. The sunlight is warm on your face, the breeze gentle. For a moment, you almost forget where you are. But then, a bell rings again, always the bells, always the summons. And you know that rest is fleeting here. There is always another ritual, another audience, another chance to be noticed or destroyed. You straighten your coat, dust the mud from your sleeves, and turn back toward the labyrinth of corridors and courtyards. Ready? Almost. For whatever comes next. Because at Versailles, survival is an art. And you are only just beginning to learn how to paint with shadows. Your next destination isn't yours to choose. Like everyone at Versailles, you are led more than you lead. A servant appears, quiet as breath, and gestures for you to follow. Down another corridor, across a marble floor veined with the stories of centuries, you're guided into a salon smaller and dimmer than the last. A chamber where morning light filters through thick curtains and the air is heavy with the scent of old books, wax, and the faintest undertone of mold. A handful of nobles lounge on upholstered chairs, their bodies draped in expensive silks that fail to disguise their restlessness. At one end of the room, a pair of girls play cards, their laughter edged with cruelty. A man in a faded blue coat is deep in conversation with a woman whose powdered face is so carefully made up that it might as well be a mask. You find a seat by the window, half-shaded, and watch. Servants come and go, bringing letters on silver trays, offering slices of fruit or tiny cakes no one ever seems to eat. Someone complains about the coffee, too bitter, too cold. Another glares at a page boy for dropping a cup. Underneath every exchange is the sense that one wrong word, one careless gesture, could become tomorrow's scandal. Across from you, a young man stares at his own reflection in a polished teapot, adjusting his wig over and over with nervous hands. He catches you watching and forces a smile. "Are you lost yet?" he asks, his voice pitched low, for you alone. "Don't worry, it never gets easier. The palace is always shifting. People vanish here, even while they're standing right in front of you." You consider a reply, but before you can answer, a bell chimes. Another summons, this one sharper, more insistent. Instantly, everyone rises, moving as a single organism, the currents of ambition and fear pulling them through yet another door. You follow, swept up once again, and find yourself in a portrait gallery. Here, the walls are crowded with faces from every era. Kings in armor, queens with unreadable eyes, children dressed like adults and adults who never learn to grow up. The faces blur together in the candlelight, a tapestry of power and memory. A woman near you leans in, her breath scented with cloves. "Do you know the story of the king's favorite?" she whispers. "The one who died of fever last winter? They say her ghost still walks these halls. I've never seen her, but..." She shrugs. "Perhaps she simply learned to hide better than most." The words linger as you move through the gallery, past velvet ropes and gilded frames, your own reflection chasing you in every polished surface. You realize, slowly, that Versailles is built not just of stone and gold, but of secrets, layer on layer, like dust on a windowsill. You emerge at last into another grand salon, the windows flung wide to the gardens. The sun is higher now, warming the marble and drawing new scents from the earth outside. The air here is fresher, for a moment, and you let yourself breathe a little easier. Servants set up tables for midday refreshment. Silver platters gleam, laden with sugared fruit, candied nuts, slices of soft cheese. The nobles circle, each one carefully choosing a morsel, a partner, a topic for conversation. It is all a dance, and you are learning the steps by watching, imitating, improvising. You find yourself beside a tall, narrow window overlooking the fountain of Apollo. The water sprays upward, sparkling in the light, and for a moment the illusion of paradise is complete. But behind you, a voice cuts through the peace. "Have you heard?" It's the girl in red from the waiting room, her voice low, conspiratorial. "Madame La Roche has been sent away. They say she angered the king. Something about a letter or perhaps a look. No one really knows. But she's gone, and so is her entire household." You glance at her, unsure how to respond. She shrugs, biting into a sugared plum. "Versailles is quick to forgive small sins," she says, "but it never forgets the big ones." You watch as she turns away, drifting toward another group, her laughter rising above the hum of the crowd. Around you, the salon is alive with stories. Triumphs, humiliations, the delicate ballet of favor and disgrace. You wander out onto a terrace, the stone warm beneath your feet, the air heavy with the perfume of 1,000 flowers. In the gardens below, gardeners work silently, pruning roses, raking gravel, trying, always in vain, to tame the wildness at the edges. Two children chase each other around a fountain, their shouts echoing up to the terrace. You remember suddenly that not everyone here plays the same game or knows the rules. A man joins you at the balustrade, his coat unbuttoned, his face lined and tired. "My first year here," he says, staring into the sunlight. "I thought I would never last. I thought the beauty would swallow me, or the rules would break me. But it's not the gold or the etiquette you have to fear. It's the waiting waiting to be noticed, waiting for your luck to turn, waiting for someone else to fall so you can rise. You nod, understanding more than you expected. The bells ring again, and it's time to return inside. You descend the steps, the sound of your own footsteps almost lost in the hush that falls as the crowd gathers for the midday audience. Back inside, the palace feels different, tenser, brighter, the energy sharper, hungrier. People move with purpose, each one angling for position, for the briefest flicker of the king's attention. You realize with a chill that everything here is watched, measured, weighed. Even the smallest gesture matters. A servant hands you a folded note, and signed, the writing elegant and precise. Beware of empty smiles, it reads. Here, even the mirrors have ears. You slip the note into your sleeve, heart pounding. For a moment you consider leaving, finding your way out, escaping into the fresh air and open fields. But you know already that you are caught. Versailles has you. The gold, the shadow, the secret. They are all yours now. The rest of the day stretches ahead, full of possibilities, traps, and glittering illusions. You steel yourself for whatever comes next. Another audience, another meal, another round of laughter and lies. As you move through the palace, you realize you are no longer a visitor. You are part of the game, for better or worse. And somewhere, deep inside, a voice whispers, "This is only the morning." As midday approaches, the palace seems to swell and contract with the rhythm of the day. Courtiers slip away for private meetings, some to plot, some to plead, some to steal a rare moment of silence in a world that never truly sleeps. You wander, learning to listen not only with your ears, but with your skin, with the careful instinct that tells you where to linger and where to disappear. It's in one of these quieter corridors, a passage lined with faded tapestries and the scent of old dust, that you see something you were never meant to notice. A servant, young and thin, slips through a narrow door hidden in the paneling, balancing a sloshing chamber pot. The door swings back, just for an instant, and you glimpse the cramped, shadowy world behind the walls. Stone steps slick with damp, stacks of dirty linen, the ghostly shapes of other servants moving quickly, quietly, invisible as breath. You realize with a cold clarity that Versailles is two palaces at once. One of mirrors and music, and another, secret and stinking, pulsing behind the scenes. For every sparkling ballroom, there is a cramped passageway where sweat and fear hang heavier than perfume. For every noble with a powdered face, there is a servant whose hands are cracked and raw, whose eyes never quite meet yours. You turn away, but the knowledge lingers. Even as you rejoin the parade of velvet and lace, you feel the hidden palace breathing beneath your feet. Back in the salons, the mood has changed. There's a brittle energy in the air, an edge of hunger beneath the polite conversation. A rumor is spreading. Someone's been caught cheating at cards. Someone else has been discovered in a compromising situation with a visiting diplomat. The details shift with every retelling, growing wilder, more delicious. No one cares what's true. The story is the thing, and in Versailles, stories are more powerful than armies. You find yourself cornered by a pair of elderly marquises. Their wigs ask you, their eyes bright with gossip. They quiz you gently, fishing for news. Where are you from? Who do you know? What have you seen? You answer cautiously, inventing nothing, revealing less. It's a game, and you are learning to play it. As the day warms, the palace's true scent emerges. Sweat rising beneath silk, perfume failing to mask the rot in the air. The sweet sickliness of too many bodies crowded in too little space. Somewhere, you hear the crash of a dropped tray, the shrill voice of a lady berating her maid for a stain that will never quite come out. In another room, a valet dozes standing up, head bobbing with exhaustion, unnoticed by anyone who matters. You slip away, seeking a little air. The gardens call to you, green and gold in the noon sun. You descend a staircase, boots slipping a little on the smooth stone, and step out into the dazzling light. Here, too, there is theater. Gardeners trimming hedges to geometric perfection, fountains erupting in calculated beauty, groups of courtiers walking in measured circles, their laughter sharp as scissors. But there are cracks in the illusion. You see muddy footprints on the marble, a gardener with his hands wrapped in dirty bandages, a child's handprint smudged across the perfect white of a marble nymph. You catch the scent of manure, strong and immediate, and see a stable boy herding a string of horses behind a hedge. You find a bench in the shadow of a lime tree and sit, letting the din of the palace fade to a background hum. For a moment, you watch the clouds move across the sky, the distant shimmer of heat rising from the slate rooftops, the line of servants hurrying back and forth with baskets of laundry and jugs of water. Life outside the palace is hard, but at least it is honest. You don't have long to rest. A bell rings yet again, urgent and sharp. You rise, brushing dust from your coat, and head back inside, bracing yourself for another round in the endless dance of Versailles. The afternoon brings its own rituals. Music in the salons, lessons in etiquette, a carefully orchestrated walk in the Hall of Mirrors for those lucky enough to be noticed. You are drawn into a small group, a baroness with sharp eyes, a young chevalier with a nervous laugh, a pair of sisters who finish each other's sentences with alarming precision. They question you about your impressions, your lineage, your opinions on music and poetry and the affairs of state. Every answer feels like a test. The baroness leans close, her voice a silk thread. Versailles, she whispers, is a place where the truth wears a mask, and the mask always smiles. A servant brings more wine, then more cakes, each tray more lavish than the last. But the cakes themselves are dry, and the wine tastes faintly of vinegar. You notice no one eats much, no one drinks deeply. Appetite is dangerous here, and hunger must be hidden. Someone begins to play a violin, the notes bright and brittle in the thick air. Laughter rises, brittle and forced. Outside, thunder rumbles, a storm gathering beyond the gilded windows. For a moment, you catch your own reflection in a mirror. You see the sweat beating at your temple, the smudge of dust on your cuff, the uncertainty in your eyes. But when you blink, all you see is another mask. One more face among 1,000, desperate to survive. The day drifts on, measured by bells and whispers, by the endless procession of rooms and faces and small, poisonous kindnesses. By evening, you are exhausted body, mind, and soul stretched thin by the weight of so much gold, so much ambition, so much fear. As the sun sets, painting the gardens in gold and shadow, you find yourself alone for a moment at a window overlooking the fountains. The palace behind you glows with candlelight. In the distance, lightning forks across a darkening sky. For a breath, everything is silent. You understand suddenly why people never truly leave Versailles, even when they escape. The palace gets under your skin. It seeps into your bones, your thoughts, your dreams. It is beautiful and terrible, a prison and a stage, a place where everything is possible and nothing is safe. You turn away from the window, heart pounding, and slip back into the golden labyrinth, ready, or at least resigned, to face whatever the night will bring. Because in Versailles, every day ends as it began, with secrets, with shadows, with the lingering scent of roses, and something much, much older. The Palace of Versailles is a creature that never truly sleeps. Even as dusk paints the windows with gold, inside, a deeper current pulses, one that you now sense with every breath, every step. In the past hours, you have watched sunlight fade from the endless galleries and felt the world tilt as the candlelit rituals of evening begin. But with every hour, your understanding grows sharper. Survival here is not about glory, but about endurance, about learning to move through shadows and gold with equal caution. Tonight, you move as if through water, every sense on high alert. The corridors are alive with movement, the clatter of shoes on marble, the urgent whisper of silk, laughter that stops the moment you draw near. You are neither guest nor prisoner, but something in between, a shadow gliding through a world that wants to both consume and ignore you. You pass through salons where musicians tune their instruments, the notes thin and nervous. You see nobles gathering for supper, their faces painted with expectation and dread. The air is thick, with the scent of roast meat and honey, with incense from the chapel, with the perfume that clings to every tapestry and every breath. But beneath it all, always, is that unshakable undertone, of sweat, of unwashed bodies, of 1,000 secrets festering in the cracks of gilded walls. At supper, the theater resumes with a new cast of characters. You find a place at the edge of a crowded table, where conversation rises and falls in practiced waves. Nearby, a count with fingers stained by ink and wine leans close to a young marquise, his words curling around her like smoke. Across from you, an elderly duchess picks at her food with delicate distaste, pausing only to glare at her companion, a servant caught between fear and exhaustion. The food is rich, but your appetite is dulled by the spectacle. Platters of capon and venison, bowls of candied fruits, sweet pastries layered with cream. All so beautiful, so extravagant, and yet here in Versailles, even abundance tastes of tension. You watch as people eat and do not eat, speak and do not speak, all of them performing for an invisible audience. A sudden clatter draws your attention. A goblet has fallen, red wine spilling across the linen like a wound. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then the servant leaps to clean it, hands shaking, cheeks flushed with shame. The nobleman whose cup it was does not scold. He simply turns away, his smile brittle as glass. You see the servant's eyes flick up, pleading, searching for mercy that will not come. You catch the gaze of the marquise beside you. She leans in, voice barely more than a breath. Every night, someone pays for another's mistake, she murmurs. If it's only wine on the table, consider it a mercy. The meal continues more quietly now. You notice a subtle shifting of alliances. Seats changing, glances traded, words chosen with surgical care. The conversation turns to politics. Rumors from Paris, new taxes, the king's moods. One baron boasts of a new favor. A lady quietly mourns a cousin exiled for speaking too freely. At your end of the table, a young chevalier tries to impress a trio of ladies with tales of duels and distant wars. But their attention drifts to a diplomat from Venice, whose accent and fortune seem to outshine all other charms. You find yourself drifting, your mind growing heavy with the weight of other people's ambitions. You try to remember the world outside, the one with real air, with trees that grow wild and untamed, with nights so silent you can hear your own thoughts. Here, every hour is a storm, every room a trap. After supper, the palace divides. Some retreat to private rooms for gambling or music. Others linger in the salons, their voices rising as the wine loosens their tongues. You wander, drawn by curiosity, pulled by an uneasy sense that somewhere, in all this glitter, there is something real waiting to be found. You stumble into a small chamber half hidden behind velvet curtains. The room is thick with smoke and low voices, a world apart from the stage-lit salons. Here, nobles and servants mingle, the hierarchy blurring in the shadows. You see a lady's maid dealing cards to a marquis, a stable boy listening raptly to the tale of a battle fought long ago. The language here is earthier, the laughter darker, the truths less well hidden. A woman offers you a cup of rough brandy, her eyes sharp with challenge. "First night?" she asks. You nod. She grins, teeth crooked but bright. "Don't worry, the worst is over. Or maybe it's just begun." You drink, the brandy burning away the lingering taste of fear. For a moment, you feel almost free. The conversation turns to stories, real ones, for once. A servant who disappeared, a noble whose debts were settled with a single midnight duel, a child born in the stables and raised as a page. You listen, hungry for truth, for anything that feels solid beneath your feet. The night grows deeper, the room's quieter. At last, you find your own chamber, a narrow bed, a jug of water gone tepid, a window that barely opens. You undress slowly, every muscle aching from the weight of the day. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the palace breathe around you. The creak of beams, the distant shouts, the soft, hopeless weeping of someone alone in the dark. You drift towards sleep, haunted by dreams of endless corridors, of mirrors that show only strangers, of a garden where every flower is cut before it can bloom. When you wake, the world is pale and shivering. The palace is quieter, the storm of ambition paused for a breath. You dress in silence, your clothes stiff and musty, your mind already bracing for another day. In the corridor, you meet the same servant who led you yesterday. Her eyes red from lack of sleep, her hands wrapped in linen. She does not smile. "Come," she says. "There is much to see, much to learn, and very little time." You follow, already exhausted, already changed. Versailles has seeped into you. You feel it in your bones, in your dreams, in the wary way you hold yourself against the cold, against hope, against everything you once believed. The day unfolds as before, but you see it with new eyes. You notice the stains on the silk, the dust in the corners, the way even the brightest laughter carries a note of despair. You see the king again, this time not as a son, but as a man ringed by sycophants and shadows, his smile tired, his gaze distant. At breakfast, a fight breaks out between two young nobles. Their words are sharp, their gestures sharper. Someone spills coffee, someone else laughs too loudly. You watch as the quarrel dissolves into forced apologies, the energy dissipating into the air like smoke. Afterward, you are summoned to a lesson in dance, another ritual, another test. The instructor is precise, merciless. He corrects your posture, your steps, your very breath. You stumble, flustered, and the room titters behind you. But you do not break. You keep moving, keep learning, because to falter is to be forgotten. Later, you find yourself in the king's garden, summoned with a small group for a private audience. The king is in good spirits, or at least pretending to be. He asks questions about your family, your history, your dreams. You answer carefully, feeling the weight of every word. He nods, perhaps approving, perhaps not. When he moves on, your heart is still pounding. The afternoon brings another storm, this one real. Rain lashing the windows, thunder rattling the chandeliers. You take refuge in a library, rows of books muffling the chaos outside. A girl sits across from you, her dress a little too plain for the court, her eyes bright with mischief. She offers you a book, one of poetry, soft with use. The secret to surviving Versailles, she says, is to find something of your own, even if it's just a single line. You read together as the storm rages. For a moment, the world is simple, just rain and words and the quiet certainty that somewhere there is something worth holding on to. When the sun returns, the palace stirs again, more restless than before. The evening is filled with music, with laughter too sharp to be real, with the endless churn of rumor and desire. You dance, you listen, you watch. You begin to understand the rhythms of the court, the way hope flickers in the darkest corners, the way power hides behind every smile. As night falls, you step outside onto a balcony, the air cool and clean after the rain. You look out over the gardens, the fountains sparkling under the moon, and you realize that you are not lost, not entirely. You have survived another day. You turn back to the palace, ready to face whatever comes next. Because here, in this world of roses and rot, of gold and grime, you are learning not just how to endure, but how to belong. The next morning, you rise before the sun. The palace is nearly silent in these early hours, its grand corridors echoing with the soft shuffling of servants and the low hum of voices preparing for another day of spectacle. You slip from your narrow bed, pull on yesterday's clothes, and step into the chill. The scent of wax and old wood is sharp in your nose. Outside your chamber, a maid is already kneeling, scrubbing a smear of filth from the flagstones, her arms red and raw. She glances up at you, a flicker of resentment in her eyes, then looks away, her head bowed. In these empty moments, Versailles reveals its other face. Here are the footmen, yawning and silent as they sweep the marble floors. Here are the laundresses, hunched and hurried, dragging baskets of sodden linens that reek of bodies, perfume, and worse. Here is a boy barely into his teens, hauling a bucket brimming with waist down a stairway no noble ever sees. The glamour is gone, just labor and exhaustion, and the quiet fear of punishment. But you are not one of them, not quite. You are neither servant nor master. You are something in between, a watcher, a wanderer, an apprentice in the rituals of both obedience and ambition. You move through the waking palace as if through a dream, the boundaries between privilege and poverty blurring with every step. You make your way to the kitchens. Vast, cavernous, loud with clanging pots and the sizzle of fat. The air is thick with heat, the scents of bread, onions, sweat, and wood smoke mingling into a single, overwhelming perfume. Cooks shout at one another. A thin dog sniffs under the tables, and in one corner, a girl with her hair in a rough braid is weeping quietly as a baker berates her for burning a tray of loaves. No one comforts her. There is no time and little pity. In the underbelly of Versailles, you slip out again before anyone can notice your presence. The sun is rising now, spilling pale light into the grand halls. You return to your place among the courtiers, the transformation nearly complete. Collars are straightened, shoes buffed, faces painted and powdered, smiles fixed in place. It is another day, and the performance begins anew. The crowd gathers for the king's morning procession. Today, the tension is thicker than usual. There are whispers of a letter intercepted, a foreign visitor fallen ill, a servant missing without trace. No one says these things aloud, but the fear is palpable, thrumming just beneath the surface. You are swept along to the Hall of Mirrors, your eyes dazzled by 1,000 reflections, your ears ringing with the chatter of hope and envy. The king enters, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. This morning, his mood seems lighter. He smiles, asks after a countess's health, accepts a poem from a trembling young page. But you notice the way his hand lingers on the hilt of his cane, the way his eyes narrow when he thinks no one is watching. Even here, even for him, nothing is entirely safe. After the ceremony, you find yourself pulled into a knot of nobles discussing last night's storm. The talk is lively, but every sentence hides a test. Who was seen where, with whom, and why? You answer carefully, keeping your own secrets close, watching how quickly alliances are made and broken with a word, a glance, a rumor. One woman, a viscountess with silver in her hair and fire in her eyes, draws you aside. "You're new," she says, her tone both curious and cool. "Let me give you some advice. Listen more than you speak, and never trust anyone who offers you advice." She smiles at your confusion, then drifts away, her laughter trailing behind her like perfume. You are left alone for a moment, standing in the swirl of silk and powder, trying to understand the rules of a game that shifts every time you think you've learned them. The hours pass in a blur of small rituals. A lesson in etiquette, a session with a harpist, a long, stifling luncheon where a marquis brags about his hounds and a bishop sighs at the state of the harvest. You watch the faces around you, some bored, some hungry, some lost. You begin to sense who matters and who does not, who is favored and who is fading. In the afternoon, you wander the gardens with a small group, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth and autumn leaves. You listen to their gossip, their complaints, their boasts. You marvel at how each tree, each hedge, each statue is both a stage and a snare, how nothing in Versailles is ever what it seems. Later, a quiet moment alone. You find a bench behind a wall of trimmed yews, the air cool and still. You close your eyes, trying to remember who you were before you came here, what you wanted, what you feared, what you believed. But the memories are fading, replaced by new hungers, new calculations. A voice startles you. Resting or hiding? It is the girl from the library, the one with the poetry book. She sits beside you, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Both," you say. She nods. "That's wise. Versailles devours the restless. It devours the bold, too. Best to be something else entirely." You smile for the first time in hours. The two of you sit in companionable silence, listening to the distant laughter of courtiers and the soft flutter of birds in the hedges. As dusk falls, the palace stirs with new energy. Lamps are lit, music begins again, and the crowds reassemble for supper. Tonight, the air is thick with anticipation. A foreign prince has arrived, and the rumors swirl like autumn leaves. Some say he is here to arrange a marriage, others that he brings news of war, others that he seeks only the king's favor. No one knows the truth, and everyone wants to be the first to discover it. The evening meal is a blur of color and sound. You are seated near the end of the table, surrounded by strangers whose names you do not yet know. The food is exquisite, the conversation sharper than any blade. At the far end, the king laughs, his face briefly illuminated by candlelight. You watch, trying to read his moods, his gestures, his silences. A sudden hush. The doors open, and the foreign prince enters, his retinue trailing behind him like a comet's tail. He is young, but his eyes are old, watchful, clever, hungry. He bows to the king, accepts the applause, and takes his seat. For the rest of the meal, all attention is on him. Every word he speaks weighed, every gesture noted. You listen, learn, adapt. You understand that every arrival at Versailles is both a promise and a threat. The palace is a living thing, always hungry, always changing, always dangerous. After supper, you find yourself alone in the gardens once more. The air is cool, the sky clear, the stars bright above the rooftops. For a moment, you feel free. But when you turn back, you see a shadow moving in the trees. A servant, perhaps, or something else entirely. You shiver and hurry inside. That night, as you lie awake in your narrow bed, you think of all you have seen. The gilded halls, the dirty corridors, the secret worlds hidden behind every door. You realize that Versailles is not just a palace, but a maze. A place designed to test, to tempt, to break. You are determined not to be broken. As sleep finally comes, you dream of mirrors. Endless, shifting, full of faces that are not quite your own. And somewhere in the dream, a voice whispers, "Survive, change, endure, or be forgotten." When morning comes, you are already awake, already changed, already ready to begin again. Days begin to flow together, each one both a repetition and a variation on the last. A symphony of rituals so elaborate and relentless that you sometimes wonder if Versailles itself is simply an enormous machine, fed by vanity and fear. Mornings blur into afternoons, afternoons into fevered, candlelit nights. You learn, quickly, to keep your back straight, your tongue sharp, your gaze lowered or lifted depending on the room and the hour. You become a shadow in a world of dazzling light. A watcher, a memory collector, a survivor. You master the art of listening for meaning beneath words, of deciphering intent from a flick of the wrist, the slow blink of an eye, the way a conversation fragments when certain names are mentioned. You watch alliances blossom and rot in the space of an afternoon. You see fortunes made and lost over a whispered rumor, a card game, a glance caught and held a moment too long. Your friendship with the girl from the library deepens. Her name, you learn, is Lucille. She becomes your confidant, your secret teacher in the court's brutal etiquette and ever-changing tides. She shares the poetry of the dead and the living, passes you notes folded small and precise, filled with warnings or jokes that make you smile in the dark. With her, you can almost remember laughter that is not tinged with caution. Lucille has a talent for vanishing. One day she is everywhere. At your side in the garden, behind you in the music room, ghosting through the kitchens with a stolen apple. The next, she disappears entirely, and you hear nothing but whispers. She was called to the Queen's chambers. She was seen speaking to a diplomat. She has fallen ill. Each time she returns, she is changed. Older, sharper, but always smiling, always quick to deflect your questions. It is she who first brings you to the shadow market, a hidden network of courtiers, servants, and outsiders who traffic in gossip, secrets, and small luxuries forbidden by court edict. Here, in a candlelit chamber beneath the palace kitchens, you see a world Versailles pretends does not exist. A laundress swaps fresh oranges for a pair of silk gloves. A footman trades a letter, sealed with the crest of a Parisian minister, for a bottle of smuggled cognac. You learn how easy it is to vanish in Versailles, how easy it is to be ruined, how fragile the walls of privilege can be. One night, Lucille pulls you into a game of cards with a group of young nobles, their faces half hidden by powder and shadow. The stakes are high, the air thick with tension. At first, you lose, then win, then lose again, but more important than the coins is what you overhear. The mention of accounts' hidden debts, a duchess's missing maid, a rumored plot to poison a rival. Every detail is a piece of the endless puzzle, a clue in the dance of survival. After the game, a young man named Henri, flushed with wine and victory, leans in. "You're different," he says. "You listen more than you talk. That's dangerous, you know. Here, it's the quiet ones who see everything. The king fears them, the nobles despise them, and the servants, well, they use them. He laughs, but there is no warmth in it. You thank him for the warning, and he squeezes your shoulder with a grip that is both friendly and threatening. Just remember, everyone here wears a mask, even you. As weeks pass, the palace's darker truths become impossible to ignore. You notice the way certain corridors are avoided after dark, the way some rooms are never mentioned, even in gossip, the way, from time to time, a familiar face simply vanishes, their name quickly erased from conversation. Servants mutter about strange noises, about a door that will not stay locked, about shadows that flicker even when no one is there to cast them. At night, you dream of these shadows, of the hidden tunnels that wind beneath the palace, of locked doors and whispered bargains, of the great hall filled not with dancers but with ghosts. Sometimes you wake with the taste of dust and fear in your mouth, your heart racing as if you have been running through endless corridors, chased by something you cannot name. During the day, you work to maintain your place in the fragile, shifting hierarchy of the court. You attend lessons, meals, endless ceremonies. You begin to sense when to speak, when to remain silent, how to flatter without fawning, how to offend without risking ruin. You cultivate small alliances, Henri, who is always eager for intrigue, Madame Rochet, a faded beauty with a memory for every slight ever committed against her, a shy boy named Émile, who seems to know every servant's secret and every noble's shame. Together, you and Lucille invent games, guessing which noble will fall from favor next, counting how many servants limp after a night spent scrubbing floors or running errands for their masters, ranking the king's courtiers by the sharpness of their wit or the gaudiness of their shoes. Sometimes you laugh so hard you forget, for a moment, the weight pressing in from all sides. But beneath the laughter, the rot persists. You see it in the sickly children of the servants, in the filth that clings to the corners of every corridor, in the way even the brightest halls stink of chamber pots and sweat. You hear it in the half-heard conversations, the threats disguised as compliments, the warnings that come too late to save anyone. You grow older, wiser, thinner, your face sharper, your gaze more guarded. Versailles has become your world, and you have learned its language. The double meanings, the silent accusations, the hunger that never truly fades. One evening, after a day of rain that left the garden sodden and the air thick with the scent of rot, you find Lucille in the library, curled in a window seat, her knees drawn to her chest. She looks up as you approach, her eyes red-rimmed and tired. "Do you ever wish you could leave?" you ask, surprising yourself. She is silent for a long time. "All the time," she says at last. "But I won't. I can't. Not now." She reaches for your hand, her fingers cold as marble. "Promise me something. If you ever have a chance, if you see a door open, a path out of here, take it. Don't look back. You promise, though you do not know if you mean it." Versailles is a trap, but it is also a stage, and you are no longer certain who you are without it. That night, you dream of escape, of running through the gardens in the dark, of leaping the wall, of finding yourself on a road that leads away from the gold and the mud and the endless, echoing bells. But when you wake, you are still here, your body stiff with cold, your mind already rehearsing the day's lines. Because in Versailles, even dreams cannot be trusted. And every morning, the performance begins again. Winter falls on Versailles not as a gentle hush, but as a slow tightening of the world. The wind, once perfumed with roses and cut grass, now howls around the stone walls, rattling the windows, creeping through every cracked door and every threadbare tapestry. The marble floors bite at your bare feet in the morning, and each corridor smells of damp wool, smoke, and the faint, lingering stench of the kitchens. By now, you know the rhythms of the palace. You have become fluent in its dialect of glances and pauses, half-truths and careful silences. You know when to vanish before tempers fray, how to navigate the social tides that swell and crash around a single whispered word. You have also learned, sometimes painfully, how quickly protection becomes peril, how a patron's smile can become a death sentence, how the king's gaze, once a blessing, is just as likely to freeze you in place as to lift you up. What you did not expect was to find your own place in this clockwork world, a niche carved not by birth or title, but by necessity, wit, and a stubborn refusal to drown. You have outlasted several rising stars who once condescended to you, and you have watched as their allies vanished, their debts called in, their names muttered only in cautionary tales. Your circle has changed, too. Lucille grows more secretive, disappearing for days on mysterious errands, returning with eyes sharper and smiles more brittle. Henri, once so sure of himself, now treads carefully, haunted by debts and shadows. Madame Rochette, a former force in the salons, has retreated, whispering about betrayal and the dangers of favor. Only Emile, ever watchful and silent, remains unchanged, still the servant who knows all and trusts no one. It is during these cold weeks that you notice something shifting in the court. The king, once restless and distracted, now holds longer, more private audiences with a select handful of advisors. The queen's ladies speak in lower voices, glancing over their shoulders more often. Rumors of unrest in Paris seep through the gilded doors. A baker's riot, pamphlets denouncing the nobility, whispers of change carried by the servants like a sickness. One evening, as you cross the marble courtyard on your way to an obligatory concert, you are pulled aside by a figure in a dark cloak. It is Lucille, her cheeks flushed, her hair loose beneath a battered cap. She presses a scrap of paper into your hand. "Burn this when you've read it," she whispers, her voice raw. "And trust no one, especially not the ones who say you can." You slip the note into your sleeve and continue on, heart pounding. The concert is a blur of sound and movement. Violins sawing through endless minuets, ladies fanning themselves with hands that tremble, men staring into the darkness beyond the stage. Your mind is elsewhere, your eyes watching every exit, every servant's face. Later, alone in your chamber, you unfold the paper. The handwriting is cramped, hurried. They're watching you now. The Spanish ambassador's man saw you with Henri. He's not what he seems. If you value your life, avoid the kitchens tomorrow. Meet me at dawn in the orangery. Burn this. You light a candle and watch the words curl into ash. Sleep does not come. Before dawn, you slip through silent halls, your footsteps muffled by the thick rugs. Outside, the world is frozen. The fountain stopped, the grass rimed with frost. The orangery is a maze of shadow and scent, hundreds of trees heavy with green fruit, the air thick with memories of summer. Lucille is waiting. She looks exhausted, her hands raw, her eyes darting to every shadow. "It's not just you," she says, barely above a whisper. "There's talk of purges. Anyone seen as dangerous, disloyal, anyone with debts or secrets. Henry's being watched, so is Madame Rochette. I'm leaving tonight. I have a way out through the old stables. Come with me." You hesitate. The old fears war with the new knowledge. Versailles is your world now. Its rules, its dangers, its strange, perverse comforts. You glance toward the palace, its windows golden against the blue-black sky, and you realize how little of yourself you remember from before. Lucille senses your conflict. If you stay, you become one of them. If you leave, you might be free or dead. But at least it'll be your choice. For the first time in months, you think of your life outside these walls. Of wind on your face, the sound of rain on a thatched roof, laughter without calculation. You remember the feeling of belonging somewhere that was not a stage, where your footsteps were not watched, where your name did not mean everything and nothing at once. A bell sounds from the palace. Time is up. Lucille squeezes your hand, hard, urgent. Midnight, by the stables. If you don't come, I'll know your answer. She vanishes, her silhouette swallowed by orange trees and fog. The rest of the day unfolds with an uncanny clarity, as if you are seeing Versailles for the first and last time. You notice the rot in the corners, the mold creeping behind the tapestries, the servants' hands shaking as they pour wine. You notice the eyes on you, some curious, some cold, some desperate. At supper, Henri avoids your gaze. Madame Rochette glares at the walls, her face gray with fear. Emile slips you a crust of bread beneath the table, his eyes hollow. By evening, the tension is palpable. The king is absent from the meal. The queen sits rigid, her hands white on the tablecloth. The courtiers murmur and speculate, each one careful to say nothing that might be overheard. Somewhere a glass shatters. No one reacts. Night comes. The palace quiets, but the tension only thickens. You pack your few belongings: a comb, a book of poems, a ribbon Lucille gave you, a small knife borrowed and never returned. You wait, heart pounding, as the hours creep by. At midnight, you slip through the servants' corridors, moving like a ghost. In the courtyard, the wind cuts through your coat. You hear voices, guards drunk and careless, then silence. At the stables, Lucille waits, face pale, eyes bright. "Are you ready?" she asks. You nod, barely trusting yourself to speak. Together, you slip into the night, following the shadowed path through the frostbitten fields, away from the palace of mirrors, of rot, of endless, echoing bells. For the first time, you do not look back. The world is cold and wide and frightening, but it is yours. And as the palace disappears behind you, you realize that survival is not just a matter of playing the game, but knowing when to walk away from the table. The night is vast and black and endless. At first, every step away from Versailles feels like shedding a layer of skin, as if the heavy golden air of the palace is peeling off your shoulders, letting you breathe for the first time in months. Lucille leads the way, nimble and silent, her lantern shielded beneath her cloak, her breath a white wisp in the frozen air. You walk in silence for hours, following muddy tracks through fallow fields, skirting small villages still asleep. Each time you glimpse candlelight in a distant farmhouse window, your heart skips, fearful of pursuers. Yes, but also hungry for the warmth of an ordinary life. The sound of barking dogs carries across the cold, clear air. Above, the stars are unfamiliar. The sky in Versailles was always shrouded by smoke, by clouds, by the very glow of the palace itself. Dawn comes slowly, a pale bruise on the horizon. You and Lucille take shelter in a copse of leafless trees, wrapping your thin coats tighter against the morning chill. For a while, you say nothing. You listen to the wind in the branches, to the distant low of cattle, to the sound of your own heartbeat slowly calming. Lucille finally breaks the silence. You don't have to come further if you don't want to. The king's men rarely look for runaways outside the nearest towns. If you know how to vanish, you can be anyone. You look at her, seeing now the scars beneath her quick wit and careless bravado, the dark rings under her eyes, the bite marks on her nails, the way she keeps one hand curled around the knife at her belt. For so long, you both survived by not caring, by keeping secrets even from yourselves. Now, here in the cold light of morning, there is only the future. Terrifying, blank, yours to shape. You nod, your voice rough. "I want to go further, just not back." You share stale bread and a little water, planning your route with a scrap of charcoal on a piece of linen. Lucille wants to head south toward Lyon. You suggest skirting Paris entirely, taking rural roads through villages too small for soldiers or spies. Days pass. The rhythm of life outside Versailles is slow, but never simple. You beg food from farmers, trade stories for a night's shelter in a barn, wash yourselves in icy streams. You learn again how to laugh without calculation, how to sleep without fear of bells or footsteps in the corridor. Sometimes, in the blue dusk, you share memories, childhood games, secret shames, fragments of poems learned by heart in the dark. But the palace does not vanish. It clings to you, in your careful glances, in your wariness of strangers, in your nightmares. One night, Lucille wakes screaming, convinced she hears the queen's ladies at the door, their voices sweet as poison. Another evening, you freeze at the sight of a man in a fine coat, sure that he is a royal informant. The world outside is beautiful, but it is never truly safe, and the rumors travel faster than you do. In a market town, you overhear news that chills your blood. More arrests at Versailles, a fire in one of the servants' wings, the king's anger at traitors. You buy a new set of clothes, cut your hair short, take new names. You become, for a time, siblings from Bordeaux. then cousins from Chartres, then just travelers, offering to work in the fields or tend animals for a night's shelter. You encounter kindness, too. An old widow feeds you soup and gives you a patchwork blanket, whispering prayers over your heads. A miller's wife offers you a place by her fire, her small daughter watching with wide, curious eyes as Lucille braids her hair. Each act of generosity is a salve, but also a reminder of how far you have come and how much you have lost. As spring approaches, the land softens. Trees bud, fields turn green, the air grows gentle. You find work at a vineyard, pruning vines and carrying water. For weeks, life settles into a pattern almost like peace. Mornings in the fields, evenings by the fire, nights filled with the music of frogs and the distant song of nightingales. Lucille grows stronger, her laughter easier. You begin to feel your own heart healing, your body remembering what it is to belong to the earth, not just to a throne of gold and lies. But the shadow of Versailles never disappears. Some nights, you dream of endless corridors, of mirrors filled with strangers' faces, of bells that will not stop ringing. Sometimes you wake with a start, certain you have heard your own name whispered by the wind. And then, one evening, word arrives that the world itself is changing. Revolution has reached Paris. The streets are filled with angry crowds, the king's banners torn down, the nobility in flight or in hiding. The world that created Versailles is burning. Lucille stares at the fire, her face hard to read. Maybe now, she says, we can be something else. You sit together in silence, watching the flames, knowing that freedom is never simple, never clean. You have learned, at last, that survival is not just escape, but the courage to make yourself new, even when the past will always haunt your dreams. And so, as the vineyards ripen, as the world remakes itself in fire and hope, you and Lucille rise before dawn, gather your meager belongings, and step onto the road again, ready, at last, to become more than survivors, to become yourselves. The palace of Versailles is far behind you, but the story you carry, the one of roses and rot, of ambition and endurance, of escape and transformation, lives on, a secret heartbeat, echoing quietly in every step you take toward the light. You and Lucille travel for weeks, then months, across a France convulsionata por cambios que helen tanto a pulvora como a esperanza. Spring softens the world, but it cannot erase the marks that Versailles has left upon your souls. Some mornings, you wake before dawn, convinced for a moment that you are still trapped behind silk curtains, waiting for orders or catastrophe. The memory of bells and whispered threats clings to you, sometimes comforting, sometimes suffocating. You find work as you go. In one small village, you mend fences for a family whose eldest son has vanished, rumored to have joined the revolution in Paris. In another, Lucille helps an old apothecary grind herbs, learning which plants cure fever and which induce dreams. You paint signs for an innkeeper, reciting poems for his patrons in exchange for bread and a spot by the kitchen fire. Times the road is cruel. Hunger stalks you. Illness shadows your steps. One night, as rain drums on the roof of a barn where you found shelter, Lucille burns with fever. You tend her, remembering lessons from a court physician, a man who treated his patients with as much disdain as he did leeches. For days, you bargain for broth, keep her warm with your own body heat, whispering stories of other places and other lives. She recovers, but the experience etches a new fragility into your partnership. For the first time, you understand how easily your thread could be cut. The revolution's echo reaches even the farthest fields. You hear rumors, some wild, some terrifying, all impossible to ignore. Peasants speak of nobles dragged from their homes, of priests hiding in root cellars, of a king besieged in his own palace by the people he once ruled. Children reenact mock trials in the mud, shouting slogans picked up from travelers and pamphlets. And yet, life goes on. You and Lucille settle for a time in a town by the river, working for a stonemason rebuilding a bridge destroyed in last year's flood. The work is hard but honest, the wages meager but enough. You share a loft in a barn with mice and dust, waking each morning to the sound of water and the smell of fresh bread from the neighbor's kitchen. Lucille learns to carve initials in stone, her hands growing strong and sure. You spend evenings by the water, watching the light change and telling each other stories, real and invented, until the past feels as distant as another country. But the shadow of your old lives is never far behind. At the market, you see a man with a scarred cheek, a former courtier, now ragged, eyes darting as he scans the crowd for danger. Lucille tightens her grip on your arm, steering you away. Another time, you hear a rumor that a list of former servants of Versailles has been discovered in Paris, and your stomach knots with dread. You make plans to move on, but before you do, a letter arrives, clumsy, addressed simply to those who remember. It is from Emile. He writes of the court's collapse, the queen imprisoned, the king powerless, the great salon stripped of gold and music. If you are safe, stay hidden, the letter says. If you can, forget us. The world is being born anew, and it has no use for ghosts. You burn the letter by the riverbank, watching the words blacken and twist. For a moment you mourn, not the court, not its cruelty or grandeur, but the loss of a shared language, a sense of belonging. For the first time, you allow yourself to grieve for who you once were. But as summer warms the land, you and Lucille move again, south and west, following rumors of work, of peace, of a place where no one cares about old names or old allegiances. Each step feels lighter. Each sunrise comes easier. Sometimes you almost believe that you are finally free. Yet every freedom has its cost, and every journey its reckoning. The old world is dying, yes, but what will you become in the new one? Autumn comes, and with it a strange, wild energy. Towns fill with travelers, refugees, men and women reinventing themselves with every lie and every handshake. You and Lucille rent a room in a bustling inn on the edge of a trading town, the air rich with the scent of apples and the promise of winter. Here, you are no longer exiles. You are part of the great, swirling chaos that is the New France. You begin to teach children their letters, trading lessons for potatoes and woolen mittens. Lucille finds work as a scribe for a notary, her careful hand and sharp eyes quickly noticed. She spends her evenings copying legal documents by candlelight, pausing only to share the day's rumors. Of armies marching east, of aristocrats disguised as peasants, of justice and vengeance and 1,000 tiny, personal revolutions. Life is fragile, but it is yours. You make friends. A baker with a prosthetic leg who tells stories of the Bastille. A washerwoman whose son vanished into the city and never returned. A priest in hiding who blesses you both with shaking hands and eyes full of hope. Sometimes you sit in the tavern, listening to news from Paris, heart pounding at every mention of the palace, every new law and every new execution. One afternoon, as you walk through the busy marketplace, you see a familiar face. Henri, gaunt and haunted, selling scraps of lace and bits of silver. He recognizes you, but says nothing. In his eyes, you see the same mixture of fear and relief that you carry every day. For a moment, the past trembles between you, a shimmering thread, and then, wordlessly, you both let it go. Winter brings hardship. Prices rise, tempers flare, rumors of war and famine swirl through the town. You and Lucille work harder than ever, your hands raw and your dreams crowded with worries. But you are alive, and together, and slowly learning how to build something lasting from the ashes of all you have lost. One night, as snow falls outside your window, Lucille presses a package into your hands. A collection of poems, copied by her own hand, bound with a blue ribbon. For the days we thought we'd never have, she says, her voice unsteady. You read the poems aloud, your breath fogging the air. Each line is a memory, a hope, a promise that you are more than your scars. You realize, as you read, that you have not just survived, you have grown. The palace is a distant echo, its secrets and shadows fading into the tapestry of your new life. Sometimes, in the stillness of night, you think of the world you left behind, of marble halls and golden mirrors, of secrets and betrayals, of a self who believed survival meant never being seen. Now, as you watch the snow drift outside your window, you know that survival is something else entirely. It is the courage to hope, to build, to begin again, even in the darkest of winters. You turn to Lucille, your heart full, your voice strong. "We're not ghosts," you say. "We're still here." She smiles, a real, unguarded smile, and you both know it is true. Spring arrives slowly, hesitantly, like someone uncertain whether they are welcome. The air, at first thin and cold, grows softer with each passing day. Buds press at the ends of branches, lambs totter in the fields, and the market square that was once little more than mud and rumor fills with color. Apples, ribbons, scraps of song. You and Lucille remain in the little riverside town, choosing, for the first time in your lives, to stay. First, it feels like an experiment. Will you be discovered? Will your old selves come hunting, ghost-like, in the night? But weeks pass, then months, and the routines of honest work and gentle company begin to weave themselves around you. The fear never quite vanishes. It lingers, a nervous flutter when a stranger passes, a tightening in your chest when you hear Paris mentioned by the miller's son. Yet slowly, day by day, your world opens again. Each morning, you cross the square to the schoolhouse. A cramped but sunlit room, its walls adorned with children's drawings, its benches polished by years of restless bodies. You have become a teacher, almost by accident. First, reading lessons for the innkeeper's daughter, then sums for the grocer's boys, then writing for the baker's niece. Word spreads, as it always does in small towns, and soon a dozen faces greet you every dawn, eager for stories and knowledge, their voices bright with the energy you thought Versailles had crushed forever. Lucille finds her place as well. She writes for the notary, then for the council, copying decrees and contracts, recording births and deaths, and soon, crafting letters for anyone who cannot put their longing or sorrow or hope into words. She becomes a keeper of secrets, and in that, she finds a quiet pride. Sometimes you meet her on the lane, ink on her fingers, her hair pulled back, her face lit with a satisfaction that is deeper than any applause. In these simple rhythms, you discover a peace that is never total, but always real. You tend a small patch of garden behind the house, coaxing carrots and herbs from the reluctant earth. In the evenings, you sit with neighbors by the fire, listening to stories, trading laughter and fears. The world outside your town feels distant, almost mythical. News arrives late, filtered through a dozen voices, and by the time it reaches you it is half fable, half warning. There are revolutions, wars, famines. Kings fall and new rulers rise. Sometimes, when the news is grim, you remember the taste of fear, the sound of marble floors underfoot, the cold eyes of those who never learned mercy. But the past is no longer your prison. It is a ghost, yes, but one you can face. On long walks by the river, Lucille confides her dreams to you. Of traveling further south, perhaps, or of opening a school for girls, or of writing a book of stories, true and imagined, her own and borrowed. You share your own hopes, tentatively at first, as if you fear they will dissolve in the light. To paint again, to fill your walls with colors that are yours alone, to let yourself believe that happiness is not a trick or a trap. One golden afternoon, as spring edges toward summer, you and Lucille climb the low hill above town, where wildflowers blanket the grass. Below, the river twists and sparkles. Above, the sky is so blue it hurts your eyes. You spread a cloth, share a meal, and talk for hours about the future, about the people you once were, about how it is possible to carry scars and still grow. The world feels impossibly wide. There is grief, yes, and fear, and the ache of old wounds. But there is also laughter, and a stubborn hope that refuses to die. You have changed. The person who escaped Versailles is not the one sitting here, watching clouds drift over the fields. You realize this suddenly with the force of revelation. The court did not destroy you. It forged you, tested you, and left its mark. But it did not claim your soul. You are more than your past. You are more than your survival. You are alive. Days pass, then weeks, then years. You become part of the fabric of the town. Children you taught grow tall and sullen, then later return with their own children. The neighbors' gossip is now as much about your garden as it is about the revolutions in Paris. Your scars fade, or become simply another part of your story. You and Lucille are no longer outsiders, nor fugitives, but pillars, steady, stubborn, and kind. Sometimes you still wake at night, heart pounding, chased by dreams of mirrored halls and echoing bells. Sometimes, when a stranger's voice drifts in from the road, you freeze, sure that you will hear your old name, spoken like a curse. But the fear never wins. The life you have built is stronger. When the world grows troubled, as it always does, the townsfolk gather in the square and look to you for words. You tell them what you can, that history is never as distant as it seems, that every person who endures hardship carries a part of the world's story with them, that kindness, fierce, stubborn, and ordinary, is the one legacy that can outlast kings and empires. Lucille writes her stories, and sometimes you read them together by candlelight. You take up painting again, daubing colors on canvas, capturing the world not as it was but as it might be. Full of hope, full of resilience, marked by pain but not defined by it. Your memories of Versailles are now less wounds than warnings, reminders that the world can change in an instant, that power is both fleeting and dangerous, that the strength to begin again is the rarest kind of courage. On the anniversary of your escape, you and Lucille climb the hill again. The town is far below. The river sings in the dusk. You light a small fire, sharing bread and wine, and speak the names of those you left behind. Not in mourning, but in remembrance. For each friend lost, you remember a moment of laughter. For every enemy, a lesson learned. You find that you are able, at last, to forgive yourself, the court, even the ghosts that still walk the corridors of your dreams. You look at Lucille, her face illuminated by firelight, and realize that the greatest secret of Versailles was not hidden in its walls, but in the hearts of those who survived. The knowledge that freedom is not the absence of chains, but the presence of hope. As summer deepens, your life grows richer. There are feasts, dances, harvests. There are moments of sorrow, illness, fear, but always there is renewal. You see yourself in the children who run through the fields, in the neighbors who greet you each morning, in the slow, patient rhythm of the seasons. Your story is now woven into the story of the town, the land, the world that grows, stubborn and green, from every seed of survival. One evening, as you sit beneath a sky thick with stars, you reflect on all that has passed. The palace is gone, but its lessons remain. You have learned to trust, to risk, to endure. You have learned that every ending is also a beginning, that every exile is also a homecoming if you have the courage to claim it. And now, as the fire burns low and the night deepens, you feel, perhaps for the first time in your life, a deep and steady peace. The story is yours, the future too. Hey friends, if you've traveled this far, you've just crossed centuries, survived a palace of poison and secrets, and found a new beginning at the edge of a world remade by courage. History isn't just dates or dusty old kings. It's stories like these, stories of ordinary people who refused to let their past become their prison, who chose hope over fear, who dared to build something new from the ruins. I want to know, where in this story did you see yourself? In the grand halls of Versailles, plotting and surviving? In the fields outside, dreaming of freedom? Or somewhere in between, caught like so many between the old world and the new? Let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts, your favorite moments, or even your own questions about the hidden lives behind the golden mirrors. What would you have done? What choices would you have made? I read every comment, and your ideas are always what makes this community so vibrant. And if you enjoyed this journey, if you want more stories that peel back the velvet curtain of history, that show you the grit behind the glory and the hope behind the heartbreak, please hit like and subscribe. It's free. It means the world to me, and it helps this channel bring more hidden voices and strange adventures out of the shadows and into the light. Thank you for listening, for imagining, and for believing that every life, no matter how small or forgotten, can shape the world in ways no king ever could. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, your story, like history, is never really over. Good night, dreamers, and welcome home.